Welcome to Creature Guide Live Daily News. For those of you that don't know, my name is Ethan. We're going to be getting into a number of mastodon and possibly woolly mammoth or Columbian mammoth discoveries in the New World. So, we are also streaming on Kick, YouTube, and Rumble. So, from news.uoregon.edu, or from the University of Oregon, mammoth prints found by UO group suggest a family trek. I'm guessing what it means by UO is specifically University of Oregon and researchers that possibly focus on mammoths. There in many universities, or at least when it comes to different discoveries around the world, you have it where apparently people that have degrees or masters or even just generally focus on completely different fields will somehow miraculously end up being part of a massive paleontological dig. So it can be kind of confusing. So, an old path marked by numerous fossilized tracks in south central Oregon's Lake County may reveal clues about the family dynamics of ancient Columbian mammoths. If this is adjacent to where I think it is over in the state of Oregon, which is just north of the state of California and just south of the state of Washington, over in the western United States, for those of you that don't know, um, this could be adjacent to Fossil Lake, which has, or there have been different Columbian mammoth as well as American mastodon discoveries in the area. There are also a couple, like two other distinct areas over in Oregon that hosts these two large mammals. Saber-toothed cats, however, are almost non-existent when it comes to the state of Oregon for some reason. When it comes to Pleistocene or Ice Age saber-toothed cats, once you march back to like the early Pliocene or definitely the late Miocene epoch, so somewhere around 8 to um, 11 million years ago, then you start to see a few different species of saber-toothed cat prior to the more famous Smilodon genus. So animals like Macarius. But unfortunately, Smilodon does not show up in Oregon. It is very common, however, over in California. The trail in Ice Age trackway was discovered by the University of Oregon's Greg Retallack, a paleontologist with the Museum of Natural and Cultural History. That's interesting. Um, I just haven't heard of that title. Okay, so we actually have a paleontologist looking at these footprints. That's good to hear. 'Cause I was expecting like something, maybe in
Herbologist?
if that's a thing,
Herbologist?
possibly. What's that?
Studies herbs?
Oh, I was just going to guess a botanist. You probably have different things, like maybe people that specifically focus on trees. However, I was expecting maybe for it to say an archaeologist. I mean, it's one thing if it's like, paleontologist and an archaeologist, that's fine. But um it's just odd when the other thing occurs. While on an exploratory field trip in 2014 with six University of Oregon students in a class about fossil plants. Okay, this also tends to happen quite a bit. The exploration or um, the goal was to specifically focus on things that to most people are of relatively little interest. So, for instance, these fossil plants, and apparently they came upon a certain Pleistocene trackway. This has happened with different species of dinosaurs and even other mammals too. But usually, when it comes to dinosaurs, they tend to come upon full on specimens and not even just fragments of their skeletons. Unsure of exactly what the site might hold, Retallick. Oh, actually, let's pull up some, I guess, Columbian mammoths. So, did you need me to spell? Okay. And also, when it comes to these animals specifically, they dominated the United States, majority of the lower 48. So basically every state but Alaska and Hawaii, except maybe certain parts of New England and certain areas possibly adjacent to the Midwest. So maybe Not certain areas of Minnesota or North Dakota or adjacent to the Great Lakes. So yeah, this model, I mean, basically, yeah, what they did is they just made a somewhat taller Asian elephant, or they gave it curved tusks. Now, the thing is that Elephas maximus is a very close relative to the Columbian mammoth, a bit more closely related to the woolly mammoth, however. So,
Okay, these guys are happy looking.
oh yeah, it actually seems like a more relatively new picture. This could depict a certain area over uh, amongst the Sierra Nevada mountains over in California. It could be adjacent to like the Angeles National Forest. There are a wide variety of different protected areas on the western side of the state that could have had several herds of Columbian mammoths, as well as coexisting with different herds of American mastodons.
Okay, these guys are violent.
This is probably I think this is based on an American Mastodon incident, but I think it's also possible or likely this might have been preserved in Columbian mammoths too, but just in a different site. This is based on a specimen of two bulls interacting with each other and I believe killing each other on impact. So, yeah, this is a very well done picture. They are represented though as being very Asian elephant-like, which they still had their morphological differences. Columbian mammoths tend to be portrayed as being a lot more elongated, or at least when it comes to their leg structure. They had very long legs compared to most species of proboscideans or just members of the elephant family in general, even compared to the woolly mammoth, the steppe mammoth. Even when looking at, I believe, like the straight tusked elephants, such as Paleoxodon, though they never came into contact with the Paleoxodon species. Columbian mammoths were specifically restricted to North America. They also did not venture down into South America, not even into the northern parts of Central America, which
Okay,
is,
what are we looking at here?
I don't know what he's stepping on. So basically, another Columbian mammoth representation on the left, an American mastodon in the middle. I think that's supposed to represent some sort of a Gomphothere by chance, but the Gomphotheres, I believe, had already gone extinct shortly beforehand. So that's another species of elephant, unless it's another type of mastodon, like maybe it's a South American mastodon by chance. Then it's just not hitting me. It has very downward tusks, however, which is not a American mastodon trait, since American mastodons tend to have long and slightly curved tusks. Mammoths in general, which are distinct from mastodons, have on average much more curved tusks. Though you can have some that at least can somewhat be similar in shape to American mastodon tusks, but they are definitely much longer. American mastodon tusks don't usually reach much more than 8 feet in length, or what's about 2.3, 2.4 meters. They did coexist with each other, but they never really competed with one another for food when it came to Columbian mammoths and American mastodons. Okay, let's see where we were. Unsure of exactly what the site might hold, Ritalik, along with University of Oregon science librarian Dean Walton, returned to the location last year with researchers from the museum, the Bureau of Land Management, and University of Louisiana to excavate the trackway. It is also interesting when different random universities that are not also close by happen to just decide to collaborate on a certain discovery like this. You would just expect maybe certain neighboring universities would, but apparently that rarely happens. The team identified 117 impressions dated to about 43,000 years ago. That's at the very end of the Pleistocene. I mean, give it somewhere around 33,000 years, but that's at the very end of the Ice Age. Though, right before this is shortly before the last major glaciation or Ice Age event. that are thought to represent footprints of adult, juvenile, and infant mammoths in a layer of volcanic soil at a fossil lake. Yep, here we go. Okay, this is exactly what I thought. So it is here. Fossil Lake is one of the areas in Oregon that is very well known for at least larger herbivorous megafaunal species. I believe the earlier species of saber-toothed cat have been found in this region as well, just not Smilodon, unfortunately. An ancient basin first excavated by University of Oregon science professor Thomas Condon in 1876. Whoa. Well, I didn't realize that it was that far back. That's actually quite astounding. That's it's like shortly before Yellowstone National Park was created, or at least classified as a national park. The remote site, 65 miles southeast of Bend, I'm guessing that's a town, is administered by the Bureau of Land Management. Elephants once roamed much of North America. Okay, just to remind everybody, because this can confuse people that don't really take too close of a look at prehistoric proboscideans or members of the elephant family. True elephants, like with what you see over in Africa and Asia today, did not exist in North America. It was simply the different species of mammoths, mastodons, and certain other relatives of these two small groups of the proboscideans. With woolly mammoths across Alaska and Canada, it is also possible woolly mammoths did roam into the United States interior, just not very far south. So, probably into certain areas of the northern Midwest over in Minnesota, possibly Wisconsin, and as well different parts of New Hampshire, Maine, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. But that's probably the most, or at least when it comes to the furthest south that they would range. And Columbian mammoths, probably at certain regions or at certain points, might have headed further north into areas of southern Alberta, even British Columbia, or possibly even Saskatchewan, Canada, but not venturing too much further north. You also had the steppe mammoth, another species which roamed different areas of Alaska and Canada. So, okay, and Columbian mammoths from Washington State to South Dakota and south into Mexico. Oh yeah, that's another thing. There have been um forgot the province over state over Mexico, but there has been a Columbian mammoth site, kind of similar to the one near Waco, Texas, that has been discovered over in Mexico, consisting of several Columbian mammoth individuals.
So you're not saying a sighting.
No, unfortunately. I believe also in the same area there have been possibly Smilodon and giant ground sloths that have been found in the region. And you did have also different medium-sized species of ground sloths coexisting with the Columbian mammoths at this time. Let's see. So most went extinct about 11,500 years ago, but some isolated populations of woolly mammoth persisted until 4,000 years ago, or like 3,400 years ago. But um, also, those woolly mammoths were confined to more northern regions, kind of like Wrangel Island, just north of northeastern Russia, or basically Siberia, which is eastern Russia. And certain individuals off of different islands off the coast of Alaska and possibly even Europe. And that's also not including even the different species of dwarf elephants. Initially, the University of Oregon led team, which included Adrian Brose, now a doctoral student of Retalix, who had been in the fossil class, quickly zeroed in on a 20 footprint track exhibiting some intriguing features. These prints were especially close together, and those on the right were more deeply impressed than those on the left, as if an adult mammoth had been limping. That is, Cedric Halleck, who is also a professor in the Department of Earth Sciences. That is really captivating to see when there have been different footprints of mammoths, mastodons, or even larger species of dinosaurs, medium-sized species, even medium-sized species of mammals, and you can tell that the animal was having a physical or locomotive issue. So, in this case, it seems to be that the animal was injured. The limping animal wasn't alone. The 6 member research team reported in a study published online ahead of print in the Journal of Paleogeography, Paleoclimatology, and Paleoecology. 2 sets of smaller footprints appeared to be approaching and retreating from the limper's trackway.
Wait, wait. So the exact same article was printed in all these different publications.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I guess because usually they only mention one specific journal and seeing 3 is new, but not surprising. Let's see. Um, Approaching and retreating. So I'm guessing this might be a mother, possibly an aunt. Maybe it was an older sister, though it could have also been at some point, maybe even an older brother. With what I'm guessing are just younger calves. I'm just trying to imagine how this is occurring within this mammoth group, since it doesn't seem like we have any specimens. These juveniles may have been interacting with a limping adult female, returning to her repeatedly throughout the journey, possibly out of concern for her slow progress, said Ritalik, the study's lead author. Oh, so it seems like she was moving, if this was a female, at such a slow pace that the youngsters were able to quickly get ahead of her, which is interesting. Well, and then come back to her. Um, this is quite a unique scenario because usually when you think of elephants today and different migrations, usually when you're thinking of African migrations, they do occur in Asia. They're just in smaller distances, and there are, I believe, a number of times when the calves can even be towards the front of the herd. But when it comes to African elephants, there are so many instances where the calves are struggling, especially if they're having to make it through the dry season. And well, also they're just born in many instances. So this is like through part of mid spring if you're over in the northern hemisphere. So around April to the beginning of fall over in early October. So if you're looking at different areas of Kenya, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, South Africa, but, yeah, seeing this, I mean, especially if there's maybe a massive cool front occurring, we don't know if there's specifically a massive dry spell that's occurring like in Africa as well, but obviously it'd be a bit different. Yeah, it's a huge question as to what's going on, how she got injured too. Such behavior has been observed with wounded adults in modern matriarchal herds of African elephants. Trace fossils, such as those found in trackways, can provide unique insights into natural history. Tracks sometimes tell more about ancient creatures than their bones, particularly when it comes to their behavior. It can, depending on how the feet are splayed out, and sometimes it can be a basic sort of a locomotion, but it can still tell a lot as to specifically how the animal is moving its feet. Where instead, like before, a lot of these different footprints, especially if you're referring to mammoths and then even different species of long necked sauropod dinosaurs, it was a really big guess as to how these animals would have moved. But even then, even with the footprints, it helps getting in more um, specimens of these specific herbivores and then having a very in depth physiological analysis onto it, or locomotive analysis. So trace fossil tracks. Okay, it's amazing to see this kind of interaction preserved in the fossil record. The excavation was done under a Bureau of Land Management permit and funded by a Sandal Society grant from the Museum of Natural and Cultural History, made possible by tax deductible gifts of at least $1,000 that are used to support field research and educational programming. Specimens found in Condon's excavation, along with the rest of Condon's large collection of fossils, were donated to University of Oregon
I
and
like
the
how they threw that in there of at least $1,000 that are used as that are tax deductible. It's funny because it doesn't matter what you give like that, it's tax deductible. And why $1,000 minimum?
I have no idea even really how it works. It's in the early 1900s. Oh, they were donated to the University of Oregon back in the 1900s. Hmm. I'm guessing this is referring to different individuals of Columbian mammoths and form the core of the Museum of Natural and Cultural History's Condon Fossil Collection. So that collection today is under Retallick's direction and boasts upward of 50,000 fossil specimens. Now, I'm guessing this sounds like literally the La Brea tar pits of Oregon, which is over in California and hosts thousands of dire wolf individuals.
The way you said that
Um,
was funny. It sounded like you were saying the La Brea tar pits of Oregon are in California.
um, I I'm just trying to think. I can't recall of any tar pits there, at least at the moment. But, yeah, the La Brea Tar Pits, they are located over in Los Angeles, and there have been over 2,000 different specimens of Smilodon fatalis, the, um, the saber-toothed cat at the time over in Central and Western North America. In Eastern, or at least in the Eastern United States, you had Smilodon gracilis, which was about the size of a jaguar, so pushing around 300 pounds or a little over 140 kilograms.
Wait, jaguars get to 300 pounds?
They can.
Oh,
Yeah, large males. Smilodon fatalis was reaching somewhere between 5 to 600 pounds, or a little over 270 kilograms. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, but it mentioned the 50,000 fossil specimens. So you have several. Um,
they're probably tiny.
well, it depends. I
I
mean,
meant to have 50,000.
it could be, but there have been many. If you're talking about dire wolf skulls alone down in um, California, so the genus Inoscion, completely different genus and species from the Canis lupus or gray wolf of today, um, that have been discovered there, along with different prehistoric or ice age camel specimens, as well as ice age horses and certain ground sloths too, which has probably occurred wherever these fossil specimens are coming from. Not necessarily getting stuck in tar, but just very certain sites that are just bountiful with these Pleistocene megafaunal species. So last month, a new state law went into effect, making the museum Oregon's default repository for fossils found on state lands.
I don't like when they do that.
Is that where you have to send it over?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't agree with that either. Um, yeah, you find the fossil, it should be yours.
Well, even if they're saying for it to be identified, it has to go somewhere for identification purposes. Why does it have to go to that specific university?
I still think you really should. I mean, you're just finding a fossil. I mean, I don't think you should have to, send it somewhere to um
Yeah,
get
what it's saying
reviewed.
is that Oregon's claiming ownership over the fossils, and basically that university is getting ownership over that. Eh,
Mm, yeah, it's corrupt. So the museum also is a designated repository for artifacts and paleontological specimens collected from public lands administered by the Bureau of Land Management in Oregon. Okay. Mm, by Kristen Stromer. So I guess a relative of Ernst Stromer, who found Spinosaurus, a wide variety of dinosaurs. Okay, so we're going to head over to the next article. So, oh wait, hold on a second. What were these footprints? Do we have to click on here?
this is it.
Uh,
He's measuring
maybe.
it.
Oh yeah. Wow,
He's laying on another one, I think.
that's not a small footprint. That's unfortunate that that's all there is. Oh, the volume's up there.
I can't turn the volume up. I have it shut off.
Oh, I thought you just wanted it.
Turn it off to be sure.
Okay, where are these footprints? I'm guessing all those different circular shapes or circular indentions. This is definitely a very arid region of eastern Oregon. It's probably adjacent to Nevada.
Okay, so
Oh, that was a dead camel for a second. I think it's just their tools.
they're running a drone around it? Or is that someone driving? That's
Oh, is that them? Or wait.
yeah, that's it. See,
Oh, well, I was wondering what they were to the left.
it could be the baby ones.
And they look too elongated. But yeah, I can. That was horrible. they, it's irritating. Okay, let's head over to the next one. So from Sci News, mastodons were far more genetically diverse than previously known. Ancient DNA shows. So, um, okay, let's get right into it. I wonder if this is referring to certain American mastodon species or like the South American mastodons further south, like in different parts of Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, or even Argentina. So, ancient DNA has been useful in reconciling deep evolutionary relationships and responses to ecological changes in elephants and their relatives. In new research, scientists sequenced the mitochondrial genomes of several mastodons, five from Nova Scotia and the eastern seaboard. So, this is over in eastern Canada. So, just northeast of the states of Maine, New Hampshire, one of which may date to approximately 500,000 years ago. So this is technically late Pleistocene or during the late Ice Age. And for the first time, a unique specimen of a Pacific mastodon from Tualatin, Oregon, in addition to a partial mitochondrial genome from Northern Ontario. Huh. So one specimen from a Pacific mastodon species over in Oregon, and then um, a genome for one over in Northern Ontario. That's interesting. Yeah, we got five from Nova Scotia. That's interesting. You don't tend to hear a lot about different mastodon individuals over in Canada. Usually, it's in the United States, maybe the northeastern area or New England, but not so much Eastern Canada. This is really actually kind of relieving to hear because Canada, especially Eastern Canada, for most of prehistory, tends to be just pushed to the side. Their results show that Pacific mastodons fall within a deeply divergent mitochondrial group, extending the range of this species into Western Canada and potentially Mexico. Oh, well, I guess that would make sense. I mean, you can have it where it's in certain warmer spells where Pacific mastodons are roaming, like the Columbia mammoths, into southern areas of different parts of Alberta, British Columbia, which is over in Western Canada. Let's see. The authors also found evidence for at least three separate expansion events into northeastern coastal regions and identified two new mastodon groups, which contain distinct but geographically localized specimens.
Hmm.
You don't usually tend to see mastodons rearing up on their hind legs. Well, um, I think a certain documentary showed it. It was one called Prehistoric. It was really unfortunate. They just kept reusing the same little scenes over and over. But looking at the dentary or the tooth structure of American mastodons, and they have a very rigid jaw structure. So this is really something that you see on different species of leaf-eating mammalian herbivores specifically. Whereas mammoths are going to have an almost flat. They do have mini ridges on their teeth, but it's more of a flat and smooth dentition that is specifically designed for going after or grinding certain species of grasses that they would have fed on along the mammoth steppe. However, the grasslands down in the western United States, even certain parts of Canada, depending on the time in the Pleistocene, as well as Mexico, are going to be different from the mammoth steppe that you would find in different areas of Russia, much of Europe, and even Canada and Alaska during the Pleistocene or the Ice Age. Even as you head down into different parts of Kazakhstan, where else? Maybe even Turkmenistan, trying to think of Kyrgyzstan, and China, as well as Mongolia during the Pleistocene. American mastodons, however, would focus on a majority of the United States. Now, I do believe there might have been certain instances where mastodons did make their way into Alaska. And these were probably during certain warmer spells and simply thrived in certain areas of forest over in adjacent to, well, I guess that were completely separate from the mammoth steppe. There was forest in Alaska back during the Pleistocene. It just wasn't to the extent of today. And also, you did not have the massive, moist um, Arctic tundra that you have in different areas of Russia, northern Scandinavia, as well as Alaska and Canada. That instead you would have more of just a drier, it would still receive a numerous amount of snow, but it was more of just specifically a massive grassland that occurred throughout much of different Arctic landscapes of today. And it was interesting because the reindeer caribou were actually quite adaptive. They were likely feeding on these different species of plants, maybe lichen or moss in certain other areas, but it wasn't as abundant. So let's see. Is there anything else? No, I guess we can just head back to the article. Mastodons would have to be careful when it came to different species of predators like not American, well, American lions down in much of the United States, especially over in the West. Um, and once they reached areas such as Alaska, then they would have come into contact with the Eurasian cave lion. However, the American lion was much larger, reaching probably somewhere around 900 to 1100 pounds, or pushing somewhere between 400 to 500 kilograms. Eurasian cave lions were about the same size as Smilodon fatalis, so pushing somewhere between 5 to 600 pounds, or a little over 270 kilograms. So mastodons were initially split into numerous separate species, but later consolidated back into a single one. The American mastodon or mammoth,
Consolidated?
right, consolidated. Um, Mammuts americanum. More recently, this classification has been revised to potentially include at least two distinct species: the American mastodon and the Pacific mastodon, Mammut pacificus. Although a debate over the split has persisted. It is interesting. If you go back to like the 1600s, the 1700s, when mastodons and mammoths were first getting into the scientific field, they quickly were well known throughout the scientific community. You had like a wide variety of different naturalists, such as Carl Linnaeus, which at the time he actually didn't believe that there was this process of millions or billions of years, but he did come up with he was the Swedish scientist that um, created the taxonomic tree, which is basically the taxonomic or the family tree of organisms. Yet he did believe that they had to go through all these different mutations and adaptations, and that they would branch off into a wide variety of different orders, families, groups, and species. It wasn't just until a bit later into the 1800s that the process over millions of years became more accepted, because the theory had already come into contact much earlier in time, not just in the 1600s, which there was another Swedish scientist. It's not hitting me that I believe did accept the theory, but even back with certain you could almost say geologists, like certain, I believe, I think Danish geologists, like pushing somewhere between 13 1200s. and then with certain Greeks or even Italians back over 2,000 years ago. I just thought I'd bring that up because mastodons and mammoths were already appearing in scientific publications at least in the 1600s, but I think they were already being discovered much earlier, not including like different tusk specimens over in Russia. I was explicitly like being specific with different European scientists. So let's see. The genetic analyses confirmed the Pacific mastodons belong to a very old, well established, and separate genetic branch with a range that extended much farther than previously believed, reaching deep into the Pacific Northwest, possibly south to Mexico and as far north as Alberta. That sounds about right when it comes to mastodons. I mean, you would have had a wide variety of conifer forests, probably certain deciduous forest for them to feed on. That would probably make a much more nutritious substance for the mastodons, considering they're feeding on things like spruce. That's not really going to get them very far. Spruce is not a good source of nutrition. The only animals today that might feed on spruce, and really it's only when there's not much else available, are moose. So, and even then, they don't eat very much of it. They might munch on twigs, but twigs is a very typical sort of nutrition that animals like deer would feed on
Is
or
this
during
Manny's
hard
cousin?
winters. Yeah, I believe it is. Um, trying to think of a name, but it's just not hitting me at the moment. So, this would be a good representation of specifically woolly mammoths dominating different areas of the mammoth steppe over in different parts of Canada, Alaska, over into Eurasia. This is specifically an American mastodon. There have been different reconstructions of American mastodons being a bit more furry, and as well as certain ones where they're almost naked in some instances, or at least having as a little fur as what you see in different species of Asian elephants. Well, I guess you would say subspecies of Asian elephants, but just the 3 different species of elephant today. There might be bits of fur around the chin, obviously the tail, but all around the elephant's body there tends to be little areas of fur. And their calves, at least when referring to Asian elephants, they almost occasionally look like a little mini woolly mammoth that popped out if you're referring to the fur alone. Whereas their head's pretty distinct. I think this is also another American mastodon depiction. In fact, I think this is a painting that was created by Charles R. Knight back in the early 1900s. It's a very good reconstruction. It is interesting though. I remember seeing this from um, just previous times, and I didn't realize how elephant-like his depictions were, at least along the face and the trunk. Did give it a really long tail, which is somewhat typical of mastodons. Now, um, okay, yeah, this is somewhat more recent. Well, definitely compared to Charles R. Knight's depictions. I don't know who specifically drew this, but this is a good representation of Columbian mammoths and wood bison, not specifically prairie bison, occurring over in probably different areas of California, Utah, Arizona, Oregon back in the Pleistocene 200,000 years ago. I'm guessing that's supposed to be a Smilodon fatalis on the side. Yet he's given a very jaguar sort of depiction. I mean, it's a big guess as to what Smilodon's pigment or his overall fur, I guess, pattern would have looked like. There have been different portrayals, like some looking more like a bobcat. The problem is when referring to the bison here, they look exactly like the prairie bison of today. And prairie bison, I believe it's bison, is very recent in the geological record, or at least in the fossil record, like evolving right after the Younger Dryas event. So somewhere around 9,000 years ago. And so that's somewhere around 2,000 to 3,000 years after the Pleistocene ended. You had other species of bison, like bison latrifons, that would have existed on the California Ice Age landscape. I think also the Columbian mammoth herds would probably be much larger. You could have where this is the front of the herd, and it simply would have extended way back. This occurs even today, like, especially over in Amboseli National Park in, I believe, northern Tanzania. I think it's northeastern Tanzania. It's adjacent to Mount Kilimanjaro
Who's
National
this?
Park. So yeah, that's the Smilodon fatalis.
Oh, it is? They made him look like a
It's
leopard.
Yeah, they did give him more of like a jaguar sort of a look. And there also are the giant camels. So we also have the giant camels over in the background, and you can see, which I believe are camelops, right there. There's a giant ground sloth all alone. They're always depicted as being by themselves. Okay, well, not necessarily. In fact, in recent times, there actually have been a number of depictions of ground sloths being somewhat social. I think they gave him a bit of fur, though. I do think this bison herd's a little oversized if this is supposed to represent the much larger wood bison. In fact, let's look up bison latrifons. So Bison and then space Latri. Yeah, Fons. And also, they were much larger than today's American or Eurasian bison. And or European bison, which are taller than American bison, but um, they weigh a bit less. This is basically a wood bison from Pleistocene North America. So these individuals could reach probably somewhere between 7 to 7.5 feet in height, or pushing around 2.2 meters.
Oh, wait, I found a comparison.
Oh yeah, one of these. These are fun. So yeah. Oh yeah, we got bison antiquus here. That's who I was thinking of. Bison priscus tends to be a little less mentioned, but in recent years it's been getting a bit more recognition. And bison occidentalis is rarely put out there, but slightly bigger than bison of today over in North America. Bison occidentalis could be the specific species of bison that it's supposed to be representing in that herd, but they look very similar to today's bison over in Yellowstone, different parts of Alberta. Technically, the United States has over 500,000 bison, and there's just a thing with them having somewhere around 1 to 2% orc or cow DNA because of the small number that occurred in the late 1800s,
I'll
and
never get past them being called orcs.
oh yeah, cows. That's fun. Let's see, bison priscus. When it comes to bison latrifon, so today's North American bison don't usually reach much more than 2,300 pounds, or a little over 1,100 kilograms. Bison latrifons could probably reach somewhere between 3,000 to 3,500 pounds, or a little over. What would that be? Pushing 16 to 1,700. I'd say safe wise 1,600 kilograms. When it comes to the horns, I believe each one is somewhere between 3 to 4 feet in length, or pushing somewhere around 1.3 meters.
Why does that look like a plushie?
He does. It also looks like one of those things like or a painting
Yeah.
that's often depicted at something like a livestock show, or um just some nice nature gallery, like representing North America, or at least some wildland place. This might be representing an area further north, mainly because that mammoth looks quite furry, but it could be a Colombian mammoth. It
Oh, I thought you were talking about the the bison. I was
well,
like, "What?"
yeah, yeah, I say that. Oh well, mentioning the bison, bison latrifons do have some of the um, tallest back vertebrae, especially above the shoulder blade of any species. of ungulates or two-toed animals, two-toed mammals specifically. And it's almost like a very similar trait to what you see because if you look at the skeleton, even of today's bison to an extent, but it's more distinct in earlier species. They're almost like the Spinosaurs or the large Dinohyrus ornithomimid dinosaurs of the time. Considering for some reason the different bison species decided to evolve extremely elongated um, back vertebrae, at least towards the shoulder blade area, probably to also help propel different types of muscles.
Akita Bear said, "Bison, one of my favorite animals." Now the question is Akita Bear saying meals or just animals?
Maybe. I mean, they're great in yeah, and sandwich burgers and also just seeing roaming the landscape. When it comes to Columbian mammoths, why I think it might be one is because the ear is quite large for a woolly mammoth. Woolly mammoths have very small ears compared to their body size. Probably still move them back and forth, but they would provide very little help for releasing heat. Whereas, what was it? This? Not you. Not you. Not there. It is. Well, certain depictions of Columbian mammoths have at least as large of ears as Asian elephants, if not larger, considering despite it being the Ice Age and the Pleistocene, it would also depend on what stage. But a wide scale of the United States would actually have been quite mild, as it might have been for different areas of even Southern Europe or different parts of Central Asia and Africa, in some instances, especially sub Saharan Africa, so south of where the Sahara Desert is today. So, south of areas like Niger, Matronia, Malai, and I forgot what's north of the Central African Republic, which is just north of the Congo. Were somewhat different to today's landscapes, considering you had different megafaunal species too. This guy looks very much like a young boy Asian elephant. He looks like he literally stepped out of a time portal. Everybody else over here looks like a Columbian mammoth. Something a bit odd about his trunk here, but maybe that's supposed to represent some. No, you know what that is? This is something. This is a characteristic that you see on different elephant individuals today. This little fold of skin on both sides. Besides that, I mean, good picture. Where was I getting at about this guy? I mean, it looks good. In fact, I think the horns could possibly be a bit longer. But I mean, for an average individual, it looks decent.
He has big nostrils.
Yeah, it's very typical in different bison species as well as like even buffalo. For some reason, considering Cape buffalo over in Africa, in fact, there used to be prehistoric species of Cape buffalo, as well as I believe over in Asia that were larger than today's Cape buffalo and water buffalo species over in different parts of Thailand, Vietnam, Hong Kong.
Well, it's gotta be a problem though when he gets a runny nose. That's gotta be a mess.
Yes, but to help deal with that, this is specifically a bison and a cow thing. Don't do this, but they do lick it out.
I was wondering if you were gonna say
Yeah,
that.
not human like. Um, and then it is possible they might have had certain infections where you get clogged up, and hopefully there would be some nice Neanderthal, and he would come over and say, "Hey, let me help you with that." And he would just get a tool, and I just thought I'd
Scoop it out?
yeah. So he probably would have to get a time portal, and have somebody from the United States or Germany, France invent something called a cattle guard. Not cattle guard, one of those things where capture corral. Is that what it is? Okay, to help secure the bison. Okay, the problem with me stating that is that when it comes to bison latrophon specifically, they did not coexist with the Neanderthals. So maybe he came into contact with certain early oryx or certain other bison species over in Europe or certain parts of Asia. Okay, let's go back to the article. Why did I mention that infection thing?
Because I said its nose was running.
Well, I think yeah, that too, but I think it's that when it comes to um
Yeah, she's shown me a video of it cleaning out its nose, and it was like, "Ugh."
well, that was a cow. It
Yeah,
was
it was
some
a cow, but
rancher.
it was
Yeah. Um yeah, I was confused at first. I literally thought it was pasta coming out of his nostril, and I'm like, yeah, that's
It was
well, I
bad.
realized that's wasn't what it was. I think I thought it was fake, and it was just somebody did like some animation. It turned out that
If you've never seen one of those videos and you don't wanna eat, go watch one. You probably won't wanna eat afterwards.
yeah, I don't do that. Um, where was I? Oh no, it's just that I think many people tend to have a viewpoint of seeing, everything before recent times as being free of disease. And there are several instances in different dinosaur specimens, and as well as even different prehistoric mammals, reptiles, like even marine reptiles in the ocean, where there is evidence of these animals having massive infections. Now, when it comes to the dinosaurs, usually they tend to miraculously survive these massive injuries. So whether it's maybe respiratory or specifically something happened along their bone, like they were bitten by another dinosaur, it just doesn't seem to happen as often when it comes to mammals, and seems to also be quite common in marine reptiles too. So interestingly, Alberta appears to have been a hotspot where specific American mastodons congregated, expanded northward, and may have interbred. The East Coast and Northern Ontario specimens revealed two new and distinct genetic groups known as clades of mastodons living in the same region but at different times. The eastern species were surprisingly diverse, arriving in distinct waves of migration at least three times, a pattern driven by repeated cycles of climate warming, leading to glacial melting and the opening of new territory for northward expansion. Yeah, it is interesting. I think when also many people they think they hear glaciers are melting, they just assume it's been a bit of a long period of extensive melting of glaciers, and then all of a sudden, in recent times, everything's just disappearing. And the truth is, you have it where there's these constant back and forths of glacial events occurring. So you have it where, in some instances, they are receding, and then some where they're coming back. And in some cases where glaciers appear to be melting, they're not. They're simply calving. So they're making space for the new or the refined ice to expand. So let's see. When climate cooled and glaciers expanded, mastodons were driven south or went locally extinct. Yeah, that was also the harsh thing when it came to the Ice Age or the Pleistocene. You had many different animals. This could possibly even happen or likely happen to different populations of woolly mammoths. um, where specifically the glaciers could have simply blocked off migration to fresher, or at least access to different grasslands. And it definitely would have probably crushed different areas of forest that would have made mastodons not just head further south, but possibly die of starvation in other instances. The data shift. This would also affect the predators like the Eurasian cave lions or even the American lions themselves, different dire wolves populations. Possibly not the saber-toothed cats as much. They tend to stay south of anywhere where the glaciers were. The data shift our view of the region today, known as Alberta, in the north more generally, from a marginal roaming ground to a repeatedly occupied migratory corridor and significant landscape for mastodons with possible interbreeding. So I'm guessing this is referring to interbreeding occurring with these two distinct populations. Said Dr. Hendrik Poinar, director of the McMaster Ancient DNA Center at McMaster University. The researchers also pinpointed a mysterious and genetically distinct Mexican mastodon lineage. Oh, yeah, these guys. Basically, the southern mastodons of North America. You would reach different South American mastodons, which they believe could be a deeper branch of the western species, the Pacific Mastodon pacificus, or possibly an entirely new third mastodon species. The mastodon was among the largest living animals on Earth during the Ice Age, roaming from Beringia, present day Alaska, and the Yukon. And then you had the Bering Land Bridge, which was centered in between Russia and Alaska. And this is where you would have different migrations of different large mammals occur, either going from North America to Asia or from Asia to North America. So east to Nova Scotia and south to central Mexico. They were primarily browsers living in swampy settings, eating shrubs and low hanging tree branches. Actually, swampy settings for mastodons, at least in recent times, tends to be less often mentioned. They occupied a number of different types of ecosystems, whereas the mammoths tend to be quite picky. They really want to stay in the different grassland areas. It's not that occasionally you wouldn't see certain mammoths passing through a forest, but they're not going to stay there for long because there isn't much to eat unless it's an open woodland and then you have different areas like it's a mixed grassland. They might stay there for a little bit, but not dense forest. So, eating shrubs and low hanging tree branches and occupied a very different habitat from their distant cousins, the Ice Age iconic woolly mammoths, which roamed in open grasslands and tundra. This study represents several firsts, which includes our work on the Pacific mastodon, said Emil Karpinski, a researcher at the Harvard Medical School. It also poses many new questions. For example, how did these distant species of mastodon interact in Alberta? Did they compete for resources or did they interbreed as our lab has previously shown for mammoths? I would assume because of how possibly closely related these mastodons are to each other that they would interbreed. But you can have instances where the animals might look somewhat related to each other, but they don't interbreed. So, but I'm guessing, considering what we're seeing with the mammoths, though that is a completely different genus, that they would have interbred. These new findings, combined with those reported in the team's 2020 study, create a much more complete picture of how mastodons moved and diversified across North America. So, also, when it comes to mammoths and mastodons, likely they were decent swimmers like today's elephants as well. When doubt, occasionally you might have had certain warm summers during the Ice Age, and they simply went into different marshes or lakes, maybe even hang out or would hang out on the coast to cool down. I mean, there's definitely evidence of Colombian mammoths heading to the coast as well as woolly mammoths. We're going to focus on Colombian mammoths because in this case, with temperature, it's a better comparison of them leaving the mainland and then heading over to the Santa Monica Islands over or the Channel Islands off the coast of Southern California and would eventually be marooned off from the mainland completely and would become basically dwarf Columbian mammoths. They didn't necessarily reach the size of some of the extremely small dwarf mammoths that you would see in certain areas off the coast of Greece. I believe there's somewhere else. Oh, off the coast of Italy, like over in Sardinia and Northern Ireland, like north of Sardinia. But I still believe they reached like somewhere between 1,000 to 2,000 pounds or somewhere between 500 and 950 kilograms. So quite small compared to an animal that would weigh over 9 tons and also stand around 13 feet or 4 meters tall. American mastodons, however, these animals only reached maybe somewhere around maybe 8 feet. So pushing a little over 2.3 meters and weighing probably around 7 to 8 tons. Oh, okay. Well, thanks for joining. And we are streaming on both Rumble, YouTube, and Kick. And from prehistoric to present, my name is Ethan. This is Creature Guide Live Daily News. So happy International Ice Age Day. And remember that nothing is better than all animals all the time.